Three, two, one. Welcome back, everybody, to the Frequency of Fatherhood Summit. We have a special guest that's unlike any of our other guests, guys. Brett Pike from the Classical Learner. He's all about educating our kids. Super, super important, and not through the traditional ways, but a lot of it through homeschooling. Brett, thank you so much for being here. We really, really, truly appreciate you being here and taking the time to be a speaker here at the summit. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into this position, what drove you forward to creating the Classical Learner?
Yeah, well, I was educated to be a teacher and I wanted to make a difference in the world, and that was the route I was going to go. And when I got into that system, I realized it was terrible. It wasn't something that was uplifting to the human spirit, and it wasn't something that was empowering children. And as I came along my journey and I started to go through an awakening and see a lot of the problems in the world, and this is a father summit, the problems that men really have to address, that a lot of American institutions were very corrupt, a lot of our history is very false, a lot of our science is bought and paid for, all of these things. I started to look into people who did things a different way, and I came across this guy, Richard Grove, the Tragedy and Hope podcast, and he didn't just talk about a different history. And my background was as a historian, so I was able to really look into the things he was talking about and see how true they were. But he really talked about restructuring the framework of how we think. That the school system is teaching us what to think. And even when people wake up to the wrongs in the world, a lot of times they're just clinging to someone who says something true, but they still haven't fixed their own way of filtering information through their brain and fixing what's true. And I started to look into great minds like John Taylor Gatto, like Dorothy Sayers, and classical education. I started to read the works of really the pioneers in the field of education that they don't teach you about when you're educated to be a teacher. And how interesting is that, right? They don't teach future teachers about Maria Montessori. They don't teach future teachers about Charlotte Mason. They don't teach future teachers what a classical education is, or this philosophy of unschooling. And I started to really figure it out on my own and start to develop my own systems of not just what to think, but how to think. How do we filter information through our brain? And how can we teach young people to think so that they have something that I call intellectual self-defense, which is like the antiviral software of your brain. And I started the Classical Learner homeschooling company. I built out Homeschools Connected, which at first, because I knew I was going to homeschool, so at first I said, okay, I'll connect homeschool families. That was the idea. And then January 1st of 2022, I said, screw it. I don't like the system. I'm going to flip the table. I'll build a new system. And I started building out a curriculum, square one, and no bank loans, because loans are the devil and that's how they control us. They use our situations against us to leverage us into doing things that we don't want to do. And men used to know that in order to be free, you have to be the creditor, not the debtor. And so I don't take the bank loans. I started building from the grassroots level, and sorry about that, security. I started building from the grassroots level, and we're 25, 26 months, and not even, a little over 20 months into curriculum development. And what we've built out has been fantastic. We have thousands of members. I have thousands of children that we've been able to impact, and it gets into the what of thinking versus the how of thinking, and then it gets into what I'm really passionate about, which is, well, I'm really passionate about all of this, but arming our children with the tools they need to grow up and live free and independent lives in which they are not dependent on the government, they are not dependent on corporations, and they're not dependent on you, the parent. And that means skills. It means the development of real skills. It means the ability to use a hammer. It means the ability to think on your toes and build things with your hand, to take what's in your mind and to produce it in physical reality. And then you pair that with financial education, which we start in elementary school. You pair that with guidance to get these children entrepreneurial experience so that they can develop a mindset. And when you mix all that up, you're taking a young person who by the time they're 15, 16, 18 years old, they're ready to take on the real world. And isn't that a crazy concept that the purpose of an education should be to get a young person ready to succeed in the real world?
Yeah, Brett, that's super profound. It really is. To think that we're going to get our kids ready for the real world, and the government doesn't want it, right? And I love what you're doing, and I could tell your passion. As you said, you are very passionate. That's what drew us to you. It's what drew us to your books. My family, we love them. So what you're doing is working. I have to say that first. What I would like to say is, in your program, say you have new unschoolers, homeschoolers, under the umbrella of homeschooling, we'll talk a lot. Does it lay a foundation for kids and their families to really instill values, morals? Because I homeschool, well, I unschool, and a lot of things what we talk about, because I have a 3-year-old, is foundational attributes, right? Where we're building those values and morals. So in your curriculum, do you speak on that and help guide parents in that?
Morality comes from the home, and that's kind of the crux of homeschooling, right? Your children need to say the way that you go about doing business. They need to see the way you go about your daily activities, right? And for me, that comes from doing things with the family, right? Doing things with your father, getting out there and actually building a garden box, hammer and nail, planting seeds, taking the responsibility every day to go outside, collect those chicken eggs. Right, we do that in my house, collect those eggs, plant those seeds, water the plants, and do all of the things that a young person is supposed to do to build that character and to build that responsibility. And then if you're the good example, because I know a lot of homeschool companies say, oh, well, we're going to study the Bible every day and we're going to teach them. And that's great. Parents should do that with their kids. I study the Bible with my kids. But ultimately, you can do that till you're blue in the face. If they're not getting that example from you at home of what morality is, then they're not going to get it. So with homeschooling, it's about being the most present influence in your child's life, and then allowing them, because they learn from what you do more than what you say, allowing them to see how you go about your life, how you do the right thing by people. Let me give you an example. I took the kids to the aquarium, my wife and I, a couple of weeks ago. And when you leave the aquarium, they have the gift shop. So we bought them a few things at the end. And we got to the car and I looked at my 2-year-old and I said, what is that doing on your neck? And she was like, she doesn't know, she's 2. She put it on her neck and walked out with it, right? Now we're in the car. I got the 2 kids and my wife. So my 5-year-old's there. So this is a great teachable moment. I said, oh, we didn't pay for this. We need to do the right thing. So we went back to the gift shop, went to the lady, told her that we accidentally walked out with this, and we paid her. I bought it for my daughter. She wanted it. So we paid her for it, and I brought it back to my 2-year-old. And in that's how your child learns about morality. That's how your child learns to do the right thing. And to me, that's where it comes from, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I agree with all of that. We set the stage for sure. They're watching us, right? And the only way that can even happen is that you had awareness, you're conscious of that effort. Plus, you have to be present. And I feel like a lot of the unschooling world is present. They're with their kids and they're always there, engaged. A question I often get in my own community is, what's dad's role in homeschooling? Because a lot of people have this old stereotype of dads. We call it fatherhood 1.0 in our community, where it's fathers pay for the bills, they go to work, and they are the disciplinaries, right? And fatherhood 2.0 is nothing like that. It can have those in there, but we are very involved. So what would you say to the fathers that are brand new and they're saying, hey, where do I start? Because I feel like this is only for moms.
Your first responsibility, you just touched on it, is to be the support system for mom. And what I mean by that is being with the children all day is a tremendous burden, especially when a mom has all the other things she has going on. And if you're crushing like I am, she's pregnant all the time. And she should be, because people complain about their culture being replaced. Well, unless you have kids, your culture is going to be replaced. And we need good people to have as many children as possible. And by the way, if you want to talk about how to have a life of purpose and meaning that you'll actually like look forward to getting old, and that's how you do it. Big families is how you win, but it's a big burden for the moms. So the dad's primary job is to make sure that those children are acting with respect, that they're listening to mom. Because if they're not listening to mom, it becomes a big problem. You have to be the primary disciplinarian. Now, outside of that, everyone's homeschool is completely different. Some dads aren't very involved at all. Some dads, I run a homeschool company, so I'm very involved with what my kids are doing. You just have to feel out what works for you and your family. Now, I've already touched on a few things that you probably want dad doing that mom would rather not do, or she probably isn't as inclined to do. Construction, carpentry, engineering, teaching these life skills that, really some woman will, but generally the wife isn't as inclined to know about, right? So as a father, you want to make sure that you teach the skills of building and that type of thing. And then you want to live as the example, show your children, especially show your son, show your daughter, this is how a man treats a woman, right? And be the example of what you want your children to ultimately become.
Yeah, I like that. That's spot on. Exactly how I believe too. And I believe when we are in these roles, you hear a lot of fathers talk about, or just parents in general, making a connection with our kids. And I feel we were homeschooling no matter what from day one. We knew we were homeschooling before we ever had kids. A year prior, my wife and I talked about it. And a big reason is we knew we could have that relationship. We're going to build a closer relationship with our kids and have a connection. So a lot of fathers ask, well, how do I build this connection and a lot with their kids? And a lot of them are in public schools. A lot of them are in sports, or a lot of them have already grown up and they're teenagers, and they're the dad's now like, shit, man, I just didn't see it coming and it happened too fast. So do you have any recommendations for fathers to truly connect with their kids, and why? We'll hit this on a two-part. One for the guys who are public schoolers, and one for how are the fathers connecting at homeschooling compared to public schooling and making those connections with their kids.
Well, I went to public school growing up, and my father is a United States Marine, strongly hardworking man. And he worked a lot, but what he always did was he was always at my sporting games. I think probably in 18 years, probably missed about 3 to 5 games in 18 years of me playing sports year round. He was always there at the games. He was always there at the practices. He was a pain in my butt. He would wake me up at 4 or 5 in the morning before he went to work, take me outside, and he would make me run. I would have to go run a mile or whatever he wanted me to do that day. And those are the things I actually look back at fondly. I was like, look how present my dad was. Look how much he cared, right? And then just being a dad and just, when you get home for dinner, hang out with your kids, throw them up in the air and enjoy those moments, because those are the moments that, like you kind of brought up, your child's 2 and you blink and then they're 5, right? And then you blink and then they're 15 and you want those moments back. You're like, man, I want to hold that 2-year-old again. I miss that. Right. So you be present. And for homeschool parents, that's even easier because you really are present. I mean, I'm with my kids the overwhelming majority of their life, and that's how I like it. I want to be the primary influence in their life. So you just be there and you do activities with them and you do their schoolwork with them and you play with them and kick a ball, throw a ball. And just like my dad did, I take my son to his karate, I take him to his baseball, and you do that and you're there, and your kids will always remember that dad was always there to protect me, always there to guide me, always there to challenge me. And that's what it's about.
Yeah, I like that. And I really like what you alluded to in the beginning. Fathers just need to show up. You need to be there. You need to be present in their lives. If you're public school, if you're homeschool, one of the biggest things is just showing up, just being there, being involved in their lives. So men out there, go to your kids' games, go to your kids' recitals, go to anything and everything that your kid is doing, be involved. I really, really love it. And I truly believe that too. I preach that nonstop. Is one of the biggest things is action, right? We just need some action behind dad. We need, and mom and dad, but we are talking to father. So we need some action. Get out there, be involved, be present. So I definitely agree with you on all those aspects that you brought up there.
I mean, if I may, just imagine your entire life, right? People are like, oh, you have to be your kid's best friend or what? No, you don't. My dad wasn't my best friend growing up, but what he was for my entire childhood, all I ever knew was there was this steady rock of a human that I could always count on. He was one reliable SOB. And now, as an adult, all I've known my whole life. I mean, if I was in my 20s and I got into trouble or I made a mistake, I could pick up that phone and call my father. And that reliable, steady rock is there. And he might tell me that I messed up. He might tell me that I need to get my act together. He might tell me what I don't want to hear. But what I know is that he's reliable, that he cares. And that is, I mean, when you talk about people who grow up and they have like problems, they go to therapists and they have problems. Oh, my parents. Those aren't the people that had reliable parents that were there. You're not upset that your dad was strong. That's fine. I look back and I value that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And it makes me think about a lot of times we need to question our own past, right? And what we talk about in Frequency of Fatherhood is father wounds, mother wounds, just parent wounds in general. Like, how did we get here with these mindsets? And I'm going to bring this around for you. So we're going to question our mindsets. And to me, I became that person a long time ago. I was questioning authority. I was questioning everything. So when it was time to have kids, I was also 38 in the Army. And I was like, there's no doubt I'm homeschooling. I also didn't, like, my son's never been to a doctor. So it's like, I just question all authority, or not authority, but I question governance, I guess, overall, and way life is. And I think it's important for kids to have that. One, it gives them critical thinking skills. Two, they also can articulate and communicate what they think life is, what's life's purpose, what's their journey, and they could take us along for the ride. So how important is it for you when you're teaching all these families to say, hey, question the systems, question these systems that they put in place everywhere? Do you talk about everywhere, or is it just in homeschooling, or outside the box of homeschooling too, and all the structures that we may have in place?
I'm currently teaching a course on critical thinking and discernment. It's a curriculum, it's a course I'm teaching. I do it weekly live with the kids. It's also printouts and whatnot. And it is critical thinking and discernment is the title. And what we've been doing is I write a fake newspaper. I write two fake newspapers, actually, the Daily Cat and the Bear Standard. Now, the Daily Cat, that is, I write the Cubs to Bears children books. This is the Right to Bear Arms. Shameless plug. But the Daily Cat is our villain that the kids know, Charisma Cat. And the bear standard are actually the bears, majestic creatures. So I write this newspaper and I write fake news articles, and the children, and we go through the news articles, and they're supposed to filter the claims made in the articles through a discernment chart. And the chart reads, I know and how I know, I think I know and why I think I know, and I heard and where I can look. Then we teach them the logical fallacies. So they read over the articles and they scan them for the logical fallacies. Now, for anyone not familiar, if you were to get a classical education, this is what, like, the Rockefellers' kids get these type of educations, which, by the way, classical education is not the be all end all, but I take the valuable parts of it. Like the kids of the Rockefellers, and they hate themselves. But they would teach the logical fallacies, and that's like an appeal to authority is a big one, right? So if they come along and say that the CDC said that something's going on, and that's it, you would say, yeah, but you haven't proven it to me. You're just making an appeal to authority, right? Appeals to emotions, ad hominem attacks. If you turn on the news, almost basically all they do is ad hominem attacks. You can't listen to that guy. He's a racist, bigot, homophobe. Don't you know? Right? Straw man, where they take an argument, they slightly manipulate it, and then they try to disprove an argument that you never even made in the first place to say that you were wrong. So we have the children scan these articles for logical fallacies, and then I include sources, and that we do a lot of sourcing. So all the claims, or maybe not all the claims, they have to discern this, have sources attached to them, and they have to go back and, like, I make these fake documents, like fake tax returns, all types of stuff, and well, it's great, but so I make all these fake documents, and then they have to go through the documents and evaluate each one, and they determine its validity. I don't get to determine that for them. And one of the things we really stress is there's no one in this world that can tell you what the truth is or what you have to accept as true. And it doesn't matter if they have all this education or they tell you they worked in this field for 30 years. They have to prove, the burden of proof is on them to prove to you something is true. And only you can decide the criterion as to what is your burden, right? Your burden might be different than mine, but you have to decide in your mind, you have to discern, what is my burden of proof? So we go through the sourcing, and they evaluate the sources, primary sources, secondary sources. They talk about things they don't know, like, yeah, this was a primary source, but we should probably look into the funding of this organization and where it's coming from, right? That's just a course we're doing right now. Another thing we do is I have a unit study on the medical industrial complex, and the children actually study how to track the lobbying money. They study what lobbyists actually do, how bills are written, the revolving door and the system of how congressional staffers get jobs with 3 times the salary working for big pharmaceutical companies just a few years after they step down if they play ball. We study the history of institutions, like in the medical system would be the Flexner Report, and how it was used to basically get rid of homeopathy, naturopathy, all Eastern type of medicine. And it turns out, because we tracked the funding, the Flexner Report was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation, right? We study the military industrial complex. We do the same thing. We look into the military contractors, and we track the money and how much money they make. We track the lobbying. We track the history of this stuff, what Dwight D. Eisenhower said, what Smedley Butler said in his book, War is a Racket. And when you're in the armed forces, so I'm sure you're aware, when he died, he was one of the most decorated soldiers in American history. And everyone should read War is a Racket. And the idea behind it is, in schools, they teach reactive thinking, kind of like the Hegelian dialectic. There's a problem, you have a reaction, and then the institutions have a solution already written up for you, and you're supposed to accept it. That's reactive thinking. That's how the majority of people are. We want to teach our children to understand systems, to understand how the medical industry works from a systems level, how the government works from a systems level, and the interconnectivity between government, industry, finance, corporations. And when you start to see the world from a systems level and you learn sourcing and how to question things, how to filter information in your brain, the world starts to become a much clearer place. And we're teaching kids that from a very young age. I had to teach this stuff to myself after I woke up. So big advantage.
Yeah, no, same thing. Really quick, how old are these kids that the age group that you're talking about that you teach these courses to?
We do K through 12. The critical thinking, it's for elementary, middle school, and high school. It's beautifully complex in its simplicity, right? It's beautifully complex in its simplicity. And that's how you teach thinking. The medical industrial complex study, that's for middle school and high school, right? That's a little above them, right? I have logical fallacy courses for elementary, middle, and high school. So we have stuff for all ages, but you want to start teaching it as young as possible. But you want to do it in a way that you teach it when they're ready to understand it, because you want to, the goal is for them to understand it, not for them to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I always tell myself when I make these lessons, and I reiterate to parents, when I make these lessons, I just say, keep it simple, stupid. And that's all you have to do.
That's a very military saying too. Keep it simple, stupid. And what I think is funny is that a lot of men don't realize that our kids at a young age do comprehend all of this stuff. That, like you were saying, it's all about them actually understanding it. And for example, my son, he's 3. He's about to be 4 in March, and he could go in the grocery store and he can look at everything and be like, Dad, there's chemicals in that, chemicals in that. He knows if there's cartoon characters on a box, there's chemicals that we don't eat in this household, because we eat mostly 90% whole foods and grass-fed beef. And so he's 3 and he knows this, right? And so I think a lot of times fathers just don't understand, or parents don't understand, that our kids are way smarter. We take away from them due to our own beliefs. We take away what they're able to comprehend and understand in life, and I think a big reason that what you're doing is important is because these kids, first, they're going to have critical thinking skills, and you have to have that to be able to have tough conversations in life. And that's part of the problem of today. There's so many kids who are 25 and under who can't even have a tough conversation. They get so emotionally charged that they have to walk away, or they just make up something. So what you're doing is absolutely great and needed. But why do you think it is we're seeing so many people that are emotionally charged and can't have this critical thinking? Is it due to the public school system? Is it due to universities? What would be your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, that's the way they're being taught. If you, just this week that we're filming this, at least, the governor of New York and also in California, Gavin Newsom, just released their version of a media literacy program. And I would love for everyone in America to compare theirs and mine, and we'll see what made the best curriculum win. But their version, and their goal is to teach young people how to identify conspiracy theories and hate. And what they're really doing is, from a very young age, they're training young people not to look at arguments that the system has deemed offensive or that they've been programmed into. So what you see with people is, and this isn't unique to left and right, by the way, what you see with people is they're not even able to listen to what people with different worldviews have to say. And as we train our children to be thinkers, we want to teach them how to think, and then we want to teach them to listen and then discern. And Aristotle said, it is the mark of a great mind to be able to listen to an argument and not accept it as truth.
Yeah, dude, that's so profound. And in a world of muddy water that we're seeing, because literally what you just said, they're just muddying the water over and over and over, and it's hard for people to comprehend. I can't even believe that. I didn't see that with Newsom and all of them. They want to control our minds, that's for sure. But your teaching is needed. It's definitely needed. It's 100% needed. And hold on, you have something?
Yeah, if I could elaborate on them. So
Yeah.
what they're really doing, because I talked about how you teach the how of thinking, right? What they're really doing in public schools, and this will resonate with every one of you because we all came up through the system, is they're teaching that you look for reputable sources. So what that means is, let's say you're doing a term paper, a paper, they'll want you to cite the New York Times because they would say that the New York Times is a reputable source. Therefore, there's a high probability that what they're saying is true, and you can use that to say that, you know, what you're writing in your article is true. Then they want you to cross-reference to multiple reputable sources. So if you can show that the New York Times says this is true, and then you can show that the Washington Post says this is true, and then you can show that the Washington Examiner says this is true, and the Boston Globe, whatever, now you've cross-referenced, you have multiple reputable sources, and you can deem it as true. And the ultimate thing they want you to look at is, do authoritative sources also confirm that it's true? So if you take the CDC and the FBI or the World Health Organization, the NSA, right? If these sources, these authoritative sources, are saying something's true, and then you could reference it with reputable sources, the New York Times, the Washington Post, then you can deem that whatever the argument is true. But all they've really taught the young children is to outsource their thinking to the authority, the reputable source, the authoritative source, versus what I explained earlier, which is the how of thinking, what children should be taught is you have to prove it to me. So is what they're saying logically consistent? Do they have anything to back up what they're actually saying? Is it backed up by primary sources? Have we tracked the funding of these primary sources? Have we tracked the affiliations of the people involved that are making these claims? Right? And then we're teaching children that you filter that information through. We're actually really showing them how to, sorry, my 2-year-old, sorry. We're showing them how to visualize that, right? So this is what I know, and this is why I know it. This is what I think, and this is why I think that, right? Maybe I have to get back to some more sources. Maybe I need to track some funding. And this is what I heard, and I have a lot of looking, and here's where I could start to look. It's a schism. It's two fundamentally different ways of thinking. Does truth come from authority? And you saw this with the mask situation. It was visible to everyone. Does truth come from authority, or is truth something that has to be proven and discerned?
Yeah, no, that was deep. That was very deep. Yeah, and I loved it because even I was seeing here, I was just like, yeah, I never thought about it in that sense, you know. And I was gonna say the same thing about COVID is, you know, we saw them changing definitions nonstop. My wife and I were just talking about this yesterday, and they're changing definitions in 10 years. That's the real definition to the people who didn't grow up like we did. The definitions, they rewrite everything. They change what the truth is can change for them. As long as you listen to authority, it's going to change, and you're going to change with it. But if you question it, you know, you can make a little discernment of life and actually live your true self and live the way we're supposed to live, which is happy and free, a little bit, not controlled in all aspects. So I really enjoyed you breaking that down right there. And I'm not going to go any further because I could talk to you for about 2 hours, and I know we're trying to keep these under an hour. One big question I have for you, Brett, that I ask everyone is, what is one of the biggest obstacles you have overcome as a father?
Well, I mean, the primary lesson that I learned as a father is that you need to be an example. And I'm a very different person post being a father than I was beforehand. I mean, I I spent the early part of my 20s getting drunk and partying and, chasing girls and living my life a certain way. And becoming a husband, becoming a father, I had to shed my vices. And I still struggle with vices. One of my problems is gluttony with eating. It's one of my biggest sins. Gluttony with even the way I work. I'm obsessive. I obsess over the things that I'm into, and I have to teach myself to scale back. These things are sins for a reason. God does not make mistakes. So I had to identify the things I was doing in my own life and try to scale them back. I haven't drank alcohol in years, not because I don't like drinking alcohol. I do. I love it. But I will not have every person my children see in their life be a drinker. They're gonna grow up and they're gonna say, Dad didn't drink alcohol. I want that for them. So I don't. I don't watch inappropriate films because I can't be the best husband I can be. I can't be the best father to my children if I'm causing that strain in my relationship, even if, and people say, oh, my wife's okay with it. Yeah, mine would be too. But there's unseen mechanisms. There's bonds that are supposed to be present that get severed by that magnetic connection between you and your wife being taken away somewhere else. My biggest challenge as a father has been overcoming my own vices. Freedom comes from immense personal responsibility. People talk about 1776. They love to chant that. They love to talk about what they're going to do to the government. What they don't understand is that 1776 was only possible because those men lived their life with such extreme personal responsibility that when they boycotted England, they had gotten to the point where they were only getting 2 products from England. 2. Everything else was being produced in the colonies. They grew their own crops. They cut down wood and built their houses. They raised their livestock. They milked their cows. They turned their butter. They were blacksmiths. They were merchants. These were incredibly independent, capable men, and they were rooted in Christian community and Christian morality. And I know people always push back. I'm not a Bible thumper. That's just historically true. They're like, oh, well, America wasn't a Christian nation. No, I'm a forensic historian. When you read the writings of the people that were alive then, regardless of governance, America was unified in that morality was really important to these people. These people didn't talk it, they believed it. And they treated their neighbors a certain way, and there was a high level of trust. Yet they were all rugged individualists who were who took extreme personal responsibility in their lives. And because of that, they positioned themselves on a chessboard that they could demand their freedom. And that's the truth of what 1776 really was.
Yeah, I like that. Self-reliant, right? You have to be self-reliant. And I think that's a lot of what your teaching is. You're teaching kids to be self-reliant. And I think we all need to. Even if your kids are in public schools, on the weekends, take them outside, teach them real skills, teach them stuff that the school's not teaching them. It's okay to be in public schools, but I do think we need to engage a little bit harder there, fathers. Brett, go on.
If I could just say, for anyone listening to this, if your kids are in public school, don't look at me as get them in my classes. I'd like to be humble, but I like to be realistic. And in terms of having a history teacher and countering the narratives, I am very effective at this stuff. And I have public school students take my classes, and it's night and day from what they're getting in the in the public school system. And then once they take them, then they go back to the public school system for their regular routine, their regular schedule, and they go home to their parents and they start telling them what the propaganda is. They start telling them what the lies are, because once you teach someone to think from a systems level, once you teach them to discern, to how of thinking, you don't have to tell them what to think. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. And guys, he just said it best. Brett, you're exactly right. You guys need to sign up. I have all of his books. My wife loves them. My son loves them. I'm a history major also. I didn't tell Brett that at all, but dude, your books are great. They're spot on. My son loves them. The pictures are great. I'm gonna put it out there. You guys all need them. You need all of the books and the courses. I know we'll eventually be in them too. We've already talked about it. My wife and I have looked at them. Brett, what's the best way for everyone to contact you, follow you, join your courses, everything, man?
www.classicallearner.com. That's where you find all my stuff, the books you referenced, my homeschool community, which is called Homeschools Connected. It's our community as well as our curriculum. You get access to all of the lesson plans, the unit studies, and the courses that we put out. Everything's broken down by age range, subject matter, and sequenced. You can use it at your pace and discard anything you don't want to use. And it's $15 a month for membership to the program. And my social media, I'm Classical Learner on basically everything. I'm Classical Learner on Instagram, Classical Learner on YouTube, Classical Learner I'm a Classic Learner on Twitter, because someone took classical. I'm Classic Learner on Twitter. And on TikTok, I've had a few accounts nuked. So I'm Cubs to Bears, I'm classicallearner.com_ and real Brett Pike.
Awesome, Brett. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all your time and your wisdom and knowledge that you've bestowed upon all of these men out there today. With that being said, man, I look forward to our next talk, and hopefully next time we can talk socialization, because I think it'll be a hot one.
All right, Jack. Thanks for having me. I love it.
Take care, man. Bye.